Also check out my posts on programming, tech art, and BizDev. I worked on Sausage Sports Club for 3 years and learned an insane amount in the process. I was incredibly lucky to be surrounded by experienced and generous game makers in that time, who were willing to give feedback, advice, and help push me and my game forward every step of the way. I know few people have that privilege, so this post is to lower the ladder a bit, and hopefully make making games a little bit easier. Here are the topics I cover in this post. Every design decision made along the way was based on a few design pillars I set at the start of the project. It's not necessary to do this, but defining pillars is useful in deciding what theme you are trying to make and in giving some semblance of objectivity to making design decisions. When faced with any question in designing your game, you can always check whether they support these pillars. My design pillars for Sausage Sports Club were: one aspect of the game's UI design I am conflicted on is the player select menu. Many people playing for the first time notice and comment that it resembles the Super Smash Bros. Player select. I was pretty annoyed by this, because getting to that design was the result of solving small problems over many iterations. I spent a lot of time making changes to try and differentiate it more, but most of those changes added complexity and made the menu harder to use. Early versions of this menu front-loaded the customization process, so players had to select their character, skin, team, and head one step at a time through a small window where you could only see one option at a time. With 14 characters, 3 to 4 skins per character, 8 team options, and 60 heads, this was a long, burdensome process that was intimidating for new players and boring for decisive players. It became clear I needed to focus on reducing how much information new players needed to see before getting started, which meant fewer required choices and that getting through this menu should take as few clicks as possible. Screen space is limited and showing the same information multiple times wastes it. Sausage Sports Club has a fairly large pool of characters to choose from, so it makes more sense to show all of them at once instead of forcing each player to cycle through them one at a time. I show a grid of all available characters in the center of the screen, and each player's individual information in widgets along the bottom of the screen, using a paradigm of cursors as each player's aren tokens. As each player's selection has a lot of benefits. The most important of this is that it helps smooth the flow of getting into the game by allowing advanced players to help get newbies started. Before this change, when families with younger kids played, parents would often have to take their kids' controller to help, and I wanted to avoid that condescending break in game flow. Having a cursor that's free to move around the screen is also inherently more fun than locking your selection to a widget. It gives players room to play, because they can steal from each other, change each other's selections, and even hide tokens. It makes adding and managing bots easy since everyone can help pick characters for bots. It also establishes an interaction language that can be used in other parts of the game, like the team select menu, which happens just before a match starts, and lets players drop their token onto different team classes. Starting plays off with tokens in hand makes it so someone can play after only hitting one button to select their character, and if they are overwhelmed and another player wants to help them, they do not need to do anything, or even pass their controller. If you cannot find your token, that's fine too. The cancel button will retrieve it, even if another player is holding it. Hiding advanced, optional customization and options behind small, relatively hidden buttons keeps them from distracting or overwhelmed players without adding the extra complexity of a new menu. In Sausage Sports Club, players have advanced options like skins and player names that are not needed to play, but add depth for advanced users. By auto-assigning the first available skin when a player picks a character, we'll let players get started without having to teach about skins, giving players too many choices before they are ready. Player names are also auto-assigned, because they carry player-save data including head progress and input rebinds, but not until a player has played enough that those become relevant. Some other notes about player names. Because Sausage Sports Club is family-friendly, I wanted to limit how dirty players could make their names. I noticed by limiting names to 3 characters, basically every crossword is left out, and there's a few bonuses with only 3 letters. A much higher proportion of the names you can make are funny without players having to be clever. This limit also gives a hard cap to how many players' saves can be created, which keeps me from having to implement and communicate a cut, even on platforms with limited save data size. Here are the biggest lessons I learned from designing Sausage Sports Club's first-time user experience. FTUE. At the halfway point of development, I had figured out the gameplay and pipeline for everything, but was seriously worried about differentiating Sausage Sports Club from other local multiplayer games, and especially that the game did not offer enough for solo players. To quell that fear, I decided to add a campaign mode built for a single player and co-op with up to 4 players. I spent weeks deciding how it should be structured to add the most value, while keeping in mind the big limitation that I be the one writing dialogue, building environments, and coding everything. Once I weighed all the pros and cons, had a plan for adventure mode, and accepted it would add at least 6 months to my development, I decided scope up. I already spent 5 years on the game, and did not have any project-related debt, so why not follow through in making it the best thing I could and give it the best chance to succeed? So what is adventure mode? It's a reality TV show where you will meet NPCs and help them solve interpersonal drama by competing in sports matches. On each day of the season, more of the overworld will open up and give access to new biomes, filled with toys and entrances, new arenas. As you play, you will unlock new characters and skins, while also earning coins you will use to unlock hats. Most importantly, each playthrough holds new quests and arrangements of the overworld, meaning your adventure is always different. Elevator picture side. How does this work? I knew there was a limit to how much content I could make alone. So instead of making one linear story that would only last one playthrough, I chose to make many short stories that could be rearranged, interspersed with random sports matches, and replayed. I referenced sitcoms which similarly have short episodes, always feature the same characters, and can be watched for the most part in any other combination, without being too confusing. To get the procedural sitcom feel I wanted, I wrote lots of quests, over 2x as many as I expect. I want players to go through in one sitting. They all feature different combinations of characters, have their own 5-minute contained stories, and, for the most part, can be placed anywhere around the overworld. When starting any day of the season, I randomly grab a few from this pool of quests, making sure to only use any character once per day, and to not reuse quests later in the season. Then I pick random locations to place them in the overworld, which was important to encourage players used to linear games to go out and explore. The season requires players to go through 12 quests, and the full pool is 26 quests, so you are very likely to see lots of new quests. At least the first 3 or 4 playthroughs, I am pumped with where adventure mode ended up, especially that the structure feels so different from any other game, and that every player's experience really is unique. But the process of getting here was tough, all told.